I'm going to talk to Asa Winstanley, who's I've just seen he's on the call, and also, by the way, he's featured in this year's Heroes calendar. How you doing, Asa?
I'm good.
Are you warm enough?
Yeah, I'm in my comfies.
Look, I wanted to talk to you about October the 7th, which has become a real hot potato. As as everyone watching this is probably watching the news all the time. I mean, I remember at the beginning of it that people saying 40 babies had been beheaded, which has been totally disproved and seemed just incredible to even consider that could happen. David Lammy in one interview said that babies were raped by Hamas, and no one seemed to challenge that. And then this week, Owen Jones has got into hot water somehow by talking about how he saw the footage from Israel of what happened on the 7th of October. I'm just going to play this clip of Owen Jones talking about what he'd seen in from the video from Israel about October 7th, and also the reaction to it from Talk TV.
If there was torture too, there's no evidence given for it on camera. Now, if there was rape and sexual violence committed, we don't see this on the footage either. Now, a warning here for deeply distressing description, but a clip of an Israeli woman inspecting a badly burned woman's corpse to see if she was a relative. She had no underwear. This has been offered as evidence of rape, but that's not what you would consider conclusive evidence. We don't see children being killed.
Okay,
that's horrific.
I wasn't going to describe
I think
anything.
he's just
horrific.
He's horrific.
I actually find it really upsetting watching him say that, because I was at the same screening. I sat behind him. Now, for me, it is incredible that somebody could watch that film and that their takeaways, they didn't see evidence of rape.
Yeah.
There were multiple women who were dead with deep green bruises.
Right.
And that particular one he's talking about, I wouldn't have mentioned it, but now you've shown the clip of him. He's talking about a woman who is naked on the lower body.
Yeah.
She's dead, she's burnt, and she's contorted like a mannequin. And his takeaway is we don't have evidence she was raped.
It's just bizarre.
She is dead, she is burnt, she's undressed. And I mean, the whole 45 minutes is like that. His whole video is like that, saying proof, proof, proof. The evidence of his eyes isn't enough.
No.
So here's my plan for the week, because he went to see this screening of Bearing Witness, and he comes out saying, no, this doesn't count. We need the evidence sent to us as independent journalists so we can verify.
But when
I don't know how he thinks.
But when the Hamas
Hamas
sort of propaganda unit says there's 14,000 people dead in the Gaza Strip, he buys that.
Now that's that eloquent, beautiful guy there on Talk TV summing up. But if we look at this, is what Owen Jones's response, because he's been what they call piled on or something, trolled. Here's a little statement from me: taking legal advice about potential legal action against a number of people. So yeah, he's been getting lots of stick for that. And that's made the news in as you can see. But the other thing that's also been doing the circuits on social media is your article, Asa. The evidence Israel killed its own citizens on 7th October. That doesn't seem to be covered on mainstream news, but there's lots of evidence for that too. Why? I mean, it's quite obvious Israel needs to have Hamas as a real monsters so they can kind of use that as justification for more attacks on Gaza. But what they're not being very good at disguising what's happening. I mean, some of the information you found wasn't that difficult to unearth, was it? And also, before you go, let me just ask you the follow-on question. What do you make of Owen Jones's treatment on this?
Yeah, so much to say. Well, on the first point, some of the evidence was in plain sight, and people can sort of see it in my article. And that image that you showed of my article, the image at the top is a screen grab from CNN from Kibbutz Be'eri, which reportedly more than 100 Israelis were killed there. But no one, people in the mainstream media don't seem to be asking, well, who actually killed them? And if you look at that image, there's no way that was done by small arms, by Kalashnikov rifles, even RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades that we know that Palestinian resistance factions have. That massive destruction of a huge building in Kibbutz Be'eri was likely done by Israeli tank shelling or Israeli airstrikes even. And we know that this happened. We know we've got multiple testimonies now, and more and more coming out all the time. And I just get into some of the evidence of it in the article. And I watched Owen Jones's latest video that you did a clip from there, and he does actually mention this in passing. He mentions 2 incidents, but only to basically sort of dismiss it as exceptional incidents. He mentions the Yasmin Porat, the survivor of Kibbutz Be'eri, who says that she was in a group of 14 of about a dozen or possibly up to 14 Israelis captured by Palestinian resistance fighters, Hamas it seems. And she says that they were all eliminated by the crossfire that the Israeli soldiers did. Like, they just came in guns blazing and they eliminated everyone. And there was half an hour gun battle, and it only ended with the shelling of the house that the captives were being held in by 2 tank shells. And that there was a young girl, 12-year-old girl, who's held up as the, I think her name is Lior Hatzroni. We've done another article about it since my piece. The girl was screaming the whole time the gun battle was going on, according to eyewitnesses. But when the tank shells were fired, her screaming stopped. So it seems very clear that she was held up. She was killed by this Israeli tank shelling. And the interesting thing about her, this young girl, Lior Hatzroni, is that she was held up. She's been held up as a poster child by Israeli politicians, including Naftali Bennett on Twitter, as an example of Hamas's and Palestinian barbarism, quote unquote, that they burned her to death. Well, that doesn't seem to be the case at all. It seems that she was killed by Israelis, by the Israeli army. And there's a lot of evidence coming out about this. And I think, there's all sorts of atrocity stories being propagated, as we've seen. Like, the thing about that Owen Jones video is that the event was essentially a publicity stunt by the Israeli embassy in London. It was a publicity stunt. He says it was organized by the Israeli army. And it's a collection of footage and from 7th of October. And from some of the descriptions, some of that footage is available online. Like, they're making it out to be this sort of secret footage that nobody can see, which, some of it might be, but from the descriptions that he gives of some of the videos have been posted online. But it's a question of when they're being presented and organized and edited by the Israeli army, can we really trust the context that has been put in, and we really trust the conclusions they're coming to? I don't think we can.
I mean, in a way, if he's invited to a screening by Israel, it's almost like they're not going to give him footage that's going to go against their case, are they? So
right,
exactly. It's like turning up there at all is a bit weird if you're going to try and say it's not true. It's kind of like, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think he and Michael Walker shouldn't have gone in the first place, to be honest with you. It was essentially a publicity stunt by the Israelis. But I think it's interesting that even Owen Jones has had to say in this video response that it contains no evidence of rape. There's no rape shown in the footage. He says there's no evidence of beheading of prisoners, and there's no evidence of killing of children. And you mentioned at the beginning the infamous atrocity propaganda of the supposed 40 beheaded babies. Well, if you look at the official Israeli death count, now I'm going to be cautious in what I say, because not everybody on the death count has an age, and not everyone on the death count has a photo. So, and it may not even still now be the final death toll. But according to the figures that we have, there are no dead babies on that death count, thankfully. The youngest age, very tragic, is a 4-year-old Israeli who was killed. We don't know who they were killed by. But there's absolutely no sign from the Israelis' own figures of the 40 dead babies. It just seems to be a completely invented atrocity story for the benefit of the media in the very early days.
And it's just really the sort of making Hamas into complete monsters. I mean, the killing people in my mind is bad. You don't need to go much worse than that, but make them into monsters. It's like Israel cleans people out nicely. Hamas does it in a really bad way. It's such a ridiculous narrative in a sense, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a real demonization and monsterization of Palestinians going on, and I think I hate to relate everything to my book, but I can't. This whole story of the atrocity, all the atrocity propaganda of how Hamas supposedly carried out these mass rapes. That's what this film presented by the Israelis was supposed to show. We've seen time and time again so far, there's been no evidence presented of it. Even in this film presentation by the Israeli military, which you would think is their best evidence of it, there seems to be no video evidence of it. And it reminds me in some ways, I mean, it's on a different level, but it reminds me in some ways of the anti-Semitism witch hunt, because, Owen Jones is asking for evidence, which I don't think is unreasonable. But then just asking for evidence is then deemed by those right-wingers on that TV show and by the Israel lobby to be evidence of anti-Semitism. And that was exactly the same dynamic we saw in the anti-Semitism witch hunt, which was, oh, well, you're questioning that there's anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, you're asking for evidence, oh, that's anti-Semitic. So, it's a very similar dynamic that we're seeing here. And I think there's a lot of projection that's going on the part of the Israelis, because one of the things that I was reminded of when I was researching this article that you put up on screen was that it didn't make the final edit of my article because it was a bit off topic and it was already long, but I mentioned a Palestinian village that was expelled in 1948, and a settlement was built in its place in 1951. Soon after, the settlement is called Magen, which is literally Hebrew for shield. So these are human shields for the Israeli military. These Gaza frontier settlements. And in this particular village, Ma'in Abu Sitta, which is the village of a prominent Palestinian historian, Salman Abu Sitta, which I'm sure many viewers will know of Salman Abu Sitta's work to map the Nakba, to map the expelled Palestinian villages in 1948 that the Israeli army and the Zionist militias expelled them from. He was expelled from that village as a 10-year-old child. And what happened soon afterwards was that there was a very well documented very well documented case of Israeli soldiers stationed at one of these kibbutzes taking a young Palestinian girl. Accounts of her age vary between 10 and 15, but she was gang raped by this gang of Israeli soldiers. And that is documented, by the Israeli historians themselves. And there are several such cases like this. There are dozens of cases of documented cases of rape that took place during the Nakba. So I think there's a lot of projection going on in the atrocity stories that are happening at the moment. And I think that we need an independent international investigation into what actually happened on the 7th of October.